We welcome you to this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofebu. This is my wife.
Ofebu.
We welcome you today to this Bible study of our continuing study on responding to adversity. God created us to worship and serve Him. That is a responsibility He gave to all His children. We are supposed to, in every situation, understand the situation as it relates to our responsibility to worship and serve God. What does worshiping and serving God mean in any specific situation that we face? Whether it's a happy situation, whether it's an adversity like we are going through, that we are studying, or any kind of situation, what we are really supposed to do is to try to understand what worshiping and serving God means in that situation and respond to the situation to uphold our commitment to worship and serve God. In this Bible study, we are going to look at Paul as he was facing persecution in Jerusalem. We go through a series of events that occurred to him leading to his transfer to Caesarea, and we look at how he responded and try to interpret his response with respect to his and our commitment to worship and serve God. Honey, do you have any opening statement?
No.
Okay. So, as I said, we're going to look at Paul. He faced this relentless persecution from Jews in Jerusalem and Caesarea. They won't stop. We've gone through parts of this persecution and they continue. It doesn't matter what happened, they pressed on. Their intention was to kill Paul. And they will not stop until they accomplish this. So we will see, we'll look at the circumstances that faced him in a series of events in Jerusalem and how he evaluated the circumstances as they arose and responded to them. We'll find that he showed patience. We'll find that he showed respect for authority and respect for due process, which helps us understand that he evaluated these circumstances with respect to his understanding of the meaning of worshiping and serving God in that situation. And he lived to uphold that meaning. We will take our lesson from Acts chapter 23, verses 12 to 35, and chapter 24. We'll begin with just understanding the relentless persecution. We remember in the last Bible study, we looked at how Paul was, the interaction between Paul and the Sanhedrin. He was brought before the chief priests and the elders and had a hearing, but this hearing ended in a fiasco. So the Roman commander took him back to the barracks and dismissed the assembly. Well, they didn't stop. We also learned that it was that night that the Lord Jesus appeared to him and assured him and comforted him and said, look, stay courageous, be courageous, remain committed to remain committed to being a child of God, because you are going to testify in Rome the same way that you have testified in Jerusalem. Now, if this affected Paul, if he at that point said, okay, so I'm going to Rome, one thing he could have done was sort of stop interacting with these people, stop responding to them, and just wait for the time that he would go to Rome. But he realized that yes, God made him a promise, but he didn't know how this promise would be fulfilled. So he had to continue to respond to situations as God takes him through these situations and eventually to the ultimate objective of the persecution. Well, the men of the Jews that were bent on killing him really didn't want to stop. They hatched a plan. About 40 men, at least 40 men, got together and agreed that they were going to starve themselves, they are going to commit themselves to killing Paul, and that they will not enjoy anything else, they will not focus on anything else until they accomplish that. Then they went to the chief priests and elders, co-opted them to support with them, hatched a plan whereby they would request that Paul be brought back to the Sanhedrin, and then on his way they were going to ambush him and kill him. We will see that their relentless persecution and this plan they hatched against Paul eventually resulted in Paul's transfer to Caesarea. But they followed him to Caesarea. They didn't stop. And up to 2 years later, they were still looking for ways to implement the plan that they hatched. Let us read about the plan in Acts chapter 23, verses 12 to 15, and then we will see that we'll read portions of the Bible, sort of reading, going into the future of this, to see that even after 2 years, they were still bent on carrying out their threat against Paul. Well, let's start our reading with Acts chapter 23, verse 12.
Acts chapter 23, verse 12. I'm reading from the New International Version. Verse 12. The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. Verse 14, they went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here."
Well, this eventually resulted in Paul going to Caesarea. We're going to look at that, but let us read, because after he was transferred to Caesarea, these men were invited to come to Caesarea and present their case. Of course, they went in full force. Let us read on. This is from Acts
chapter 24, verse 1. 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor.
And 2 years later, after the Governor Festus has taken over from Governor Felix, they still pressed their case. Let's read about it.
Acts 24, verse 1. 3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem, where the chief priests and the Jewish leaders appeared before him and presented the charges against Paul. They requested as a favor to them to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem, for they were preparing an ambush to kill him along the way. Festus answered, "Paul is being held at Caesarea, and I myself am going there soon. Let some of your leaders come with me, and if the man has done anything wrong, they can press charges against him there."
So they were relentless. We've seen that. Even after 2 years, they still wanted to carry out their conspiracy. Well, let's step back to at the time they hatched the conspiracy. Paul was in Jerusalem. He had not been transferred to Caesarea yet. And a nephew of Paul came to him and told him about the conspiracy and said, these people have hatched a plan to kill you in an ambush. They are going to request that you be brought to the Sanhedrin. If you go, they will kill you along the way. Well, Paul determined the appropriate response will be to take this up with the authorities. And this is part of what we're talking about in evaluating a situation, trying to understand what is going on, and then understand your role as a Christian, your role in that situation. How are you supposed to handle it? There are so many things he could have done wrong. But he determined that there is an appropriate process, there is an appropriate authority, and that the right thing is to get that authority involved. And the appropriate way to get to the authority was to get the authority in that where he was being the ultimate authority was the Roman commander. But he called one of the officers, one of the centurions, and said, please take this young man to the commander and let him report, let him tell the commander something important that he has. He must have advised the young man and said, look, you should really go and talk to the commander. But he prepared the way for him to be taken to the commander. So the understanding here, your respect for authority and your respect for due process are part of God's mandate. And I think Paul's behavior here was in recognition of that. Let us read about it in Acts chapter 23, verses 16 to 22. Only if you want to say something at any point. You want to say something or read?
No, let's read. Let's go on.
Okay. Acts chapter 23.
Acts 23, verse 16. But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him. So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, Paul the prisoner sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you. The commander took the young man by the hand and drew him aside and asked, what is it you want to tell me? He said, some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request. The commander dismissed the young man with this warning. Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me.
Well, what happened later, we're not going to read the details, is that the commander transferred Paul to the custody of Governor Felix in Caesarea. And he transferred him under heavy security. He already knew about the ambush and he didn't want to take any chances. And he sent a note to Governor Felix telling him that he had examined the man, examined Paul, and did not really find any valid charges against Paul. Well, after Paul was taken to Governor Felix, he invited the Jews in Jerusalem to come and present their case against Paul. And actually it was the Roman commander that told them, I said, okay, I have transferred Paul to Governor Felix. The case is now in his hands. You go to him and make your case. Well, they pressed on, as we said earlier, and they went to Governor Felix. And after some preliminary, after greeting him and praising him and trying to butter him up, they made their case against Paul. They said he was a troublemaker, that he stirs up riot among Jews all over the world, and he was the real leader of the Nazarene sect. He tried to desecrate the temple. And we will see in the next section that we'll read that Paul responded to every one of their charges. He took his time and responded to every charge that they made against him. Then let us read about their charges in Acts 24 verses 5 and 6.
Acts chapter 24 verse 5. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect, and even tried to desecrate the temple. So we seized him.
Well, after they've made their case or made their accusations, Governor Felix gave Paul an opportunity to talk. And Paul told them, he made a fairly long address, much longer than the charges against him. But his defense was that he was in Jerusalem to worship when they arrested him, that he did not argue with anyone or stir up any crowd in the synagogues or other places in the city. That it is true, he worships God as a follower of the way. That he pointed out that he did not understand why they called it a sect, but he worshipped God as a follower of Jesus, and the followers of Jesus were referred to as the Word. And he explained that he believes in and respects the law and the prophets, and that when he was at the Sanhedrin, he had told them that he believed it was his belief in the resurrection of the dead, the resurrection of the dead is the reason why, one of the reasons why they were persecuting him. But the main case here is not really his response to the cases. He responded to all their cases. But what I like to bring out in this interaction is his respect for due process and respect for authority. He did it. Remember, he had this promise where Christ stood in front of him and said, "Look, don't worry, stay courageous, you are going to Rome." This could have gone into his head. And in this hearing, you say, "Well, whatever you people do, I don't really care about you. After all, I'm going to Rome." And he recognized, though, that this was a promise. It's going to come through, no doubt, but he didn't know how it will come through. And he knew that he had to respond to every situation in a way that conveys his understanding of what it means to be a Christian, what it means to worship and serve God. So respect for authority, and following due process. They've made a case against him, and to answer the case, answer in detail, and answer respectfully. Let us read about his response, and then honey, if you want to say something also at that point. His response in Acts chapter 24, verses 10 to 21.
The book of Acts chapter 24, verse 10. When the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, "I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city. And they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets. And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. Or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Unless it was this one thing, I shouted as I stood in their presence, it is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today.
Honey, do you want to say something before we talk about his interactions with Governor Felix after this meeting with the elders? Because Governor Felix actually dismissed, after hearing, he said, okay, he's going to make a decision later. He didn't make a decision. He told them to go home, and he put Paul back in detention. Well, he was in detention, put him back in detention in the camp, in custody.
Well, the event with Paul and the Jewish leaders and the Sanhedrin, it's very intricate, and it's very, it kind of, you might say it's repetitive because of the relentlessness of the persecution, but it's not. You find out that each segment of faith, there's something for us as Christians to learn. Even though it looks like it's the same thing, they accuse him of. The same accusation they brought before him in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And he was able to, talk, and God gave him the opportunity to testify of Christ. Because that's what I saw that to be.
Yeah.
Before the Jews and the Sanhedrin, until he mentioned, something that, this is the same thing that he's taking to the Gentiles, and all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
But the opportunity for him to testify of Christ had been given. And, one would have said, why didn't it just end there? Remember, we said, there was a bigger picture. If it ended there, that would have been the end of the mission.
Yeah.
But that last uproar had to be created so that he can still remain in custody and be legally brought before another group. Yeah. If Paul was to say, okay, all of you gather, let me start talking to you about this thing, he probably will never have succeeded.
Yeah.
But he, God created those environments for him to be able to testify of Christ. So even though it looked like he was being persecuted, he was, not that it looked like.
Yeah.
They thought they were achieving their own agenda. But really, the victory belonged to God. The victory was Paul's.
Yes.
So it's the same thing I'm seeing at each point that he's brought, each attack on him, each new front of persecution.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Like now, he's talking about the resurrection.
Yeah.
His emphasis in Jerusalem was a little bit different, but it's all still about the risen Christ. Yeah. It's all still about the Messiah, not the Messiah that would, come, and the resurrection of the dead and all that. So that's what I want our readers and followers to look at, to follow us. If you follow us intricately, you will see it's not repetitive, but there's something that is being brought out at each point.
Yes.
At each point of his attack.
Yes. Yes. And in this particular study, we are trying to bring out the fact that he remained respectful to people. He remained respectful to the authorities. He evaluated every situation, and determine a way to respond in order to still uphold his commitment to be that his commitment to worship God, the fact that he's a child of God. Now, after the trial with Felix, nothing happened for 2 years. There was no progress made in the case, but Paul was still held in custody. He was still on trial, but no active trial was going on. Governor Felix talked to him every now and then. He will invite Paul, or he will set up some kind of meeting with him, private meeting. In one particular case, he and his wife met with Paul, and Paul used that opportunity to preach to them, talk to them about righteousness, talk to them about resurrection, talk to them about Christ. And and then Governor Felix will get tired of this and say, okay, that's enough, we'll talk next time. One of the things that we find interesting is that Governor Felix actually was looking for a way to get Paul to bribe him. And but Paul didn't give in to this. Again, information in the Bible, at times you wonder, why is this piece of information there? I think that information is there to tell us that yes, Paul may have wanted to come out, or he may have wanted a way to get make things better for himself, but and an easy way other people would have done that in the world today is say, okay, this man is looking for something, let me butter him up a little bit, let me give him something. But Paul did not yield. He did it. Each time Governor Felix brought him, he talked to him and used the opportunity to minister to him. But he did not yield to that pressure to give him bribe. Let us read. This is an account in the Bible. Let's read it. Acts 24, 22 to 27.
So the book of Acts chapter 24 verse 22. Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias, the commander, comes, he said, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs. Several days later, Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish. He sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Jesus Christ. As Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe, so he sent for him frequently and talked with him. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. But because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison.
Well, so Felix left Paul in prison and handed the case. The case was taken over by Festus, and we are not going to discuss in this Bible study, except that, as we mentioned at the beginning, the Jews pressed on, because after Festus arrived, the first meeting they had with him, they asked for Paul to be brought back to Jerusalem. But what Paul showed in all of this, and in this small segment that we read, is that in every situation that he faced, he responded in a way that still showed his responsibility, that his commitment to worship and serve God. He always looked for, try to understand the situation in terms of that commitment, and responded to the situation in a way to uphold that commitment. I think that is what we are supposed to draw. That is the lesson we are supposed to draw from this. That even in an adversity, even when you are facing situations that are not favorable to you, that you should always understand the situation, understand what your commitment to worship and serve God means in that situation, and then respond to the situation based on that understanding. Respond to the situation to uphold their commitment to worship and serve God. This is what Paul did. He even said it when he was talking to them. He said, look, this being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Essentially saying, I always respond in a way to uphold my commitment to worship God and to serve God through men. We are supposed to radiate godliness in every situation, even situations that appear unfavorable to you. Amen.
Yeah, we cannot overemphasize this point of being steadfast, of being faithful and committed to, to our faith.
Yeah.
We cannot, and to our commitment to worship and serve God. We should not compromise, even in the face of adversity.
Yeah.
Because we can see here severally, Paul was tempted at several points. Remember the first one in Jerusalem was when he lost his school.
Yeah.
and yelled,
Yeah.
For which he apologized.
Yes.
Later. We are human beings.
Yes.
But there will be those things, but you immediately see an action. He immediately repented of what he did.
Yeah.
And you see an action that will say, yeah, this man is truly a man of God. Even when we lose it, as we are bound to. Because the sheer force or the sheer pressure from the adversity we face can make us tend to fail.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't remain fallen.
Yeah.
Look for the word and look for God, look for Christ in what you're doing.
Yes.
And that will help you to come back up
Yes.
and remain committed to that faith.
Yes.
We can see that at each point there was temptation for Paul.
Yes.
The governor here was looking for bribe. And Paul could have said, let me give him something, I'm tired of this prison. He had stayed years in prison by that time.
Yes.
But he remained committed.
Yes.
Because if he had left, for example, when the wife of the governor, who was Jewish, came, the governor sent for him again, and he started witnessing to them.
Yes. Yes.
You could see that the heart of the governor was indicting him.
Yeah.
That was what made him say, enough, I've had enough. Because he became afraid of the word.
Yes. Yes.
The word was touching his heart. You can bet that this man would think about it, and he has heard the word.
Yes.
So if Paul had given him bribe and left, that opportunity will not be there.
Yeah.
You never know when he will come before such a big political figure.
Yes.
Again.
Yeah.
So let's look for the bigger picture in whatever adversity that we find ourselves in.
Yes.
And like my husband said, Jesus appeared to him and told him, I'm sending you to Rome.
Yeah.
Paul still had to work at his situation.
Yes.
He didn't give up.
Yes.
And that's the same thing. Sometimes we say, we have a promise of this, we have a promise of this from the Bible. God has promised us, yes. But he didn't tell us to just fold our hands.
No.
He didn't tell us to just fold our hands and just, And when he wants us to be still and not do anything, the Holy Spirit will let us know that,
Yes.
you see this situation, do nothing.
Yeah.
And that will be the charge, that will be the instruction for that moment.
Yes.
Do nothing.
Yeah.
But not for us to say, okay, I'm just going to sit here until God decides to come and remove me and somehow, make me, disappear through this window and I find myself in Rome and all that. No, There was a process.
Yes.
There was a process. Everything that God does, there's process. And with that process comes patience.
Yes.
You have to be patient.
Yes.
So that you can go through that process.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to bring out here again is that adversity may be relentless.
Yeah.
It didn't stop at the one in Jerusalem. Paul has been persecuted over this thing. Look at how his accusers have been saying the same thing for how many years.
Yeah.
They will pursue him to Caesarea. Then they want to do this in Caesarea, then, God will rescue him through some miraculous means. So the adversity may be relentless, but you stay focused and stay steadfast.
Yes.
Don't give up. Look at Job, which is a typical example.
Yeah.
He stayed committed and steadfast until the end, and everything was rewarded.
Yes.
Then some other thing that came to me here is the use of the little boy, Paul's nephew.
Nephew, yes.
You see, sometimes we might think that children are too young or they don't understand the things of God, and we leave them out. But God can use anybody.
Yes.
God can. I bet you, if it's an adult that came to Paul may believe that, but Paul will say, okay, go and tell the governor. The governor might say you are lying.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yes.
How did you hear? May probe to know more.
Yes.
But God used a little child that will not bring about any kind of controversy.
Yes.
And when he came to the governor said, have you told anybody about this? He said, no. Okay, don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And he hatched his own plan, how to rescue Paul.
Yes.
So God can use even the children. Don't begin to determine for them what they should know about God and what they shouldn't know about God.
Yeah, that's true.
God can use even the children. That's one thing that came out here again to me.
Yeah.
Because that was key to
Yes.
saving Paul from that particular situation.
From the conspiracy.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has been a short Bible study. We thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for reading our summary of these Bible studies. And we remind you that all our Bible studies, all the ones we did in the past and all the ones we will do in the future, are available through our website, bankingblessing.org, bankingblessing.org. When you get there, go to the archive section and you can pull up any of our previous studies and read our summary, play the video if you are interested, or play the audio. You can download the audio and take it with you and listen to it when you have time. We thank you for being with us, and we pray that you will learn something from this series that will make a positive impact on your life and bring you closer to God's purpose for your life. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you.